long time. Yeah, Greg, anytime, man. Happy to do it. Yeah, I think it is, and I think it has been really the entire offseason. And Brock Purdy's play last year kind of put a timer on Trey Lance's tenure with the 49ers. He had 2 years left on his contract. It looks like Brock Purdy is a player that they believe in, and they do. And inside the Niners building, they love Brock Purdy. They think he's the real deal, is the phrasing that Kyle Shanahan used. So they're all in on this guy as their franchise quarterback, which means, man, there isn't any room for Trey Lance, who at this point is still an undeveloped raw prospect who needs to play football, and those opportunities aren't going to be there for him in San Francisco. So they're going with Sam Darnold, the I guess more reliable, more experienced backup option. Hmm. Mhm. Mhm. So I think it's split. So the Niners fan base right now is in a place where there's the pro, I'm going to call it pro and anti Trey Lance. That's simplifying it, but the pro Trey Lance side is of the mind that start him week 1 and let him start 17 games and he's going to wind up being the best quarterback on the roster. And that was kind of the idea when they drafted him was, okay, well, it'll be a little rough at first, but the roster's good enough that they can pick him up and eventually he'll develop. And by playoff time, they'll have a guy that can win in the playoffs with their very talented roster around him. And there are still people that believe that. And frankly, that's kind of where I'm at. I don't think he should start, but I'm still a believer in Trey Lance. So for people that are very bullish on him as a prospect, still, there's really no offer that is gonna satisfy them outside of if the Vikings give him Danielle Hunter or something like that for trade, which I don't think is gonna happen. But it would have to be a player that's going to make them substantially better this year, right? Then there's the anti-Trey Lance faction that believes he's a bust, doesn't think he's ever gonna be anything in the NFL no matter how many games he plays, and they'll take whatever to get him out of the building. Just a 6th round pick. Just take it and be rid of him, and that's what it is. So it's a pretty starkly divided, faction of the fan base. So I think there's some people who won't be satisfied with any trade, and some people who will be hugely satisfied with any trade. So it's a pretty stark divide. Mhm. So Minnesota keeps coming up. The Niners in Minnesota talked to the combine about Lance. Minnesota has Kirk Cousins in the final year of his deal. And beyond Kirk Cousins, they have Jaron Hall from BYU. They took late in the 5th round. He's a pretty significant question mark still. Not to say Lance isn't, but Hall I think is an even bigger question mark. And then they have Nick Mullins, who is a backup quarterback. Nick Mullins is not going to be your franchise guy. So I think that Minnesota makes sense in terms of, okay, you can bring him in and sit him behind Kirk Cousins and Nick Mullins maybe this year. if you really want him to just sit and not play, but I frankly would make him the backup to Kirk Cousins. And he gets to learn for a year, and then you get all of 2024 to see him play and see if okay, there's development here and you want to give him a long-term deal. You can even if you're super thrilled with what you see in practice, you can pick up his fifth year option after next year's draft, even if he hasn't played any games, and then you get him for 2 years for relatively cheap for what quarterback contracts are going for now. And you can get basically 2 years of figuring out if he's going to develop as a franchise guy or not. And you can probably do that for like a fifth round pick or a sixth round pick, which, if you're high on Lance, that I think is worth it. But outside of that, I don't know that there are many teams, maybe Tennessee, but I can't imagine that Mike Vrabel's going to have the patience to let a guy like Trey Lance develop. I think he's going to want to try and win every year. Atlanta, they have Desmond Ritter, they still need to figure things out with. I don't know that there are a lot of teams that are going to be willing to A, give up an asset for Trey Lance, and then B, just make him their starter. Whether it's this year or next year, sight unseen. Yeah, yeah. So you're looking at a 2024 ETA for him, and I think there are teams that would kind of rather roll with what they have now and then see what shakes out in the draft rather than giving up a pick for him this year. Mhm. Right. 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 Mhm. 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 Sure. Mhm. That's it. That's been my thing, is he has value to them, right? They've needed 3 quarterbacks in 4 of Kyle Shanahan's 6 years as a head coach. And if you have to go into the playoffs with that 3rd quarterback, would you rather go in with Trey Lance and his upside or with Brandon Allen? And I'm personally gonna roll with Trey Lance. I don't know where Kyle Shanahan's at. I think he would prefer somebody like Brandon Allen who's just gonna do what he thinks he's gonna do, and it's just what it is. But I that's not what I would do. I would roll in with Trey Lance. But if you're the Vikings right now, for example, or any team, the Niners are trying to get rid of this guy. So why are you going to give up a draft pick right now when you just said it? His value is only going to go down. So why not just wait until next offseason to give up that draft pick? And maybe you can punt it down the road. Maybe you can say, hey, you know what? Ahead of the 2024 draft, here's a fifth round pick in 2025. And now you're basically getting a quarterback for free for a year. So I sure. Yeah. Right. Yeah. 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 So I'm with you though. I'm not taking anything less than a day 2 pick or a player that can help them this year. They need offensive line help. They need defensive end help. So if they could get a player that they think could be in the rotation for them, whether as a reserve offensive lineman or as a defensive end, then okay, maybe they do that. But I just don't. If that offer was on the table, they would have taken it a long time ago. Yeah, there are so many teams running some version of it now, right? So here's the Kevin Stefanski with the Browns, but I mean they just paid Deshaun Watson $1 billion, and Dorian Thompson Robinson's looked good in the preseason. So I think they're probably set there. Miami is an interesting one for me because Tua's health is a huge question mark, obviously. Yeah, to his question marks, health is a huge question mark, and then it's Mike White and Skylar Thompson, and no disrespect to those guys, but right, and if Tua either can't stay healthy or if he regresses or something, now they have an option in the building. That's kinda it's the opposite conference for San Francisco. The I did I mention the Rams? I don't think they're gonna trade him to the Rams, although yeah, that'd be nuts. That'd be so wild if they did that. So those are there's there. I don't think Green Bay is going to do it. They're figuring out their own stuff with Jordan Love, who I've been pretty yeah. That's the kind of sleeper team here that I don't think is getting brought up. But man, the fact that Minnesota just keeps coming up, it was Ian Rappaport and then Jonathan Jones from CBS and then Charles Robinson from Yahoo and then Diana Rossini from The Athletic. All of them not reporting, but just like, hey, watch for Minnesota. Hey, they had talks with Minnesota. The fact that all these people who know stuff are just floating Minnesota to me says they're hearing something. Right. Right. They're hearing something, but nothing concrete, so they're just getting it out there. So I think if a deal does happen, I do think it's gonna wind up being Minnesota. Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I think he's the second stringer because of his experience, but he's also been really good and consistent in camp. And he's been really good he's been pretty good in the preseason. I don't want to oversell it. But you see the arm and you see some of these throws he makes to the boundaries and down the middle of the field and into tight windows. You see the talent that gets people talking about, wow, is Sam Darnold an MVP candidate? If Brock Purdy's not, which I thought was nuts, but right, yeah, right. But you see the vision, right? It the arm makes sense, the athleticism makes sense, all the but with Sam Darnold for me, it was never a question. I knew he was going to come in and tear it up in camp. And I knew he'd probably be pretty good in the preseason. But what does Sam Darnold look like if he enters in I'm going to pick a week. Let's say week 4. He has to come in week 4 and there's a defense that's game planned for him. And now he's the pass rush is real and he's facing starters and the pressure's on to try and win a game. And oh, they're 1-2 and he has to start week 4 and hey, you know what? Hey, you got to have this one. You got to have I think week 4 is home against Arizona. So it's like, hey, you got to have this one. What is he seeing ghosts then? That's always my question with Sam Darnold. But the teams liked what they've seen from him. He's been impressive in camp. And like I said, some of the throws he's made in the preseason, he hasn't been awesome, but there's been 5, 6, 7 throws that are legit wow throws, which you start to see why the 49ers went out and got him and made him their backup. Yep. Hmm. Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Well, that's what's okay. So you just touched on something really interesting there. So Purdy for sure when he came in looked like where Trey Lance looks like a quarterback that oh he hasn't played a lot. and he gets better as games go on because he's starting to get in the flow and you start to see the growth and he starts to understand and you get used to the speed. But with Purdy, from the minute he stepped on the field against the Dolphins, it was really clear he's played so much football. And he just there's a demeanor and a calmness to the way he plays that that was just light years above and certainly Trey Lance and honestly what Jimmy Garoppolo was doing. And Garoppolo was playing well when he got hurt, but there was like a frenetic energy in the pocket when things started to break down, and you don't necessarily see that with Purdy. The 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 thing with 49er fans and Brock Purdy is I think there are people that just really badly want a Patrick Mahomes type that, hey, just because he's on the roster, the team is going to go to the conference championship game or the Super Bowl. And those guys are hard to find. Like, it's really hard to find those guys. The Bills have one, and they've not even been to a conference title game. You know, the Bengals have been to a Super Bowl, but they've lost it with Joe Burrow. It's just really hard to find elite guys. And the fact of the matter is whether you think Brock Purdy is the a top 5 or 10 or not even one of the 32 best starters in the league, their offense scored 33 and a half points a game when he was the starter last year. That's super impressive. And he didn't lose until he blew out his UCL in the NFC Championship game. So whether you're thrilled with the idea of having a moderately talented, I'm going to say moderately talented from the NFL perspective. He's not big, doesn't have a huge arm, not super athletic, but man, he runs the heck out of an offense that just needs somebody who can run the heck out of it. So if they're going to score 30 points a game, I like where the Niners are at offensively. Bold take. Sure. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Hmm. No doubt. No doubt. I the consternation with 49er fans with Brock Purdy, I think comes down to the idea of what happens in 5 years when George Kittle's gone and Trent Williams is gone and Debo Samuel is gone and maybe their defense is only top 15 to 18. Can Purdy then put the team on his shoulders? And to me, it's like I'm not worried about 5 years from now. Can they win a Super Bowl right like this year? That's 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 what I keep coming back to. So I there's yeah. I think they'll get that benefit of the doubt from the fan base when they win a Super Bowl. That's the biggest critique I hear right now is they haven't won one yet. You don't get brownie points for like, all right, cool. But this isn't a team that's been hanging up banners, consistently. I'm 33 years old and I don't remember when the 49ers won a Super Bowl. Like I was alive, but I don't have a recollection of it. So it's been a long time. No, no doubt. That's my thing is if you have a front office and a head coach that are going to consistently have you in position to be in the title game or in the conference title game, it's hard to win a Super Bowl, man. Just be in the mix every year. That's so. I mean, eventually you do have to win one and get over the hump, but I mean, they've been yeah, feels that way. Yeah. Yeah, it feels that way, but weird stuff happens. But Yeah, it definitely feels like Purdy of all the quarterbacks this year gives them the best opportunity to do that. Okay. Oh, oh yeah, it sure is. Mhm. It's been good. It's really tough during the off season to generate content, especially, you start getting to the dog days of summer between OTAs and camp, and it's just like, man, but no, it's been good. It's been nice to have an outlet, especially right now, to be able to keep track of everything. We try and stay on top of any news and rumors. They got to be substantial rumors. You don't just take any old rando making stuff up, but trying to stay on top of rumors and news. Roger Craig being denied entry to the Hall of Fame is something that's important to me and gives me a spot to write about it. But the guy who did this before me, Chris Biederman, is one of my best friends, and he did such a good job kind of establishing a baseline for this site. And it's just been up to me to kind of cover the team that I grew up watching and loving and trying to y- provide news, but also my insight and my thoughts, and try and do so in a unique kind of way. Hmm. Hmm. I think Jalen Graham, the seventh round pick out of Purdue, I don't have him as a surprise to make the roster. I think he's definitely going to make it, but he can play, man. He is a really, really good player. It would not surprise me if he winds up starting at the Sam linebacker spot for them, which is kind of an inconsequential spot in modern defenses, right? Because it's so often two linebackers with the extra defensive backs on the field. But Graham is a legitimate sideline to sideline speed type of guy. He's already super effective at shooting gaps and getting off blocks on inside runs. He's been capable in coverage. He just moves differently than everybody else when he's on the field with these twos and threes. He looks like a starter playing with backups. And that Sam linebacker spot is open this year. It wouldn't shock me if Warren Burks winds up not making the team, but Jalen Graham to me should be the starting Sam linebacker, and then Dre Greenlaw's contract is up after the 2024 season, and it wouldn't shock me if Jalen Graham is their long-term answer next to Fred Warner. By 2025, Dre Greenlaw's contract goes through the 2024 season. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for me anyway. Yeah, looking at the our lads depth chart here, Isaiah Oliver, I think is I was under the impression he might wind up getting cut because he was not good in the preseason opener. The fact that he played wasn't a great sign because all the starters sat, but he didn't. And then he didn't play well. And then he wasn't good in the second preseason game. So what they've done using your depth chart here is Diamador Lenore has gone to the nickel, and that's where he played last year before Emmanuel Mosley got hurt. And then Lenore moved outside. So Lenore and Travarius Ward are slated to start on the outside. I think what they're going to do in nickel is bring Ambry Thomas in to play outside and then move Diamador Lenore down into the slot. That's how I think that's going to ultimately shake out. But Steve Wilkes, the defensive coordinator, really gassed up Isaiah Oliver the other day. and talked about how they're going to have certain matchups that they're going to need him and this and that. And I think it pointed directly to last year at the end of the season. Deommodore Lenoir really got picked on. He's not a big guy, but he really got picked on with like Darren Waller and Devontae Adams, and teams started just trying to line up bigger guys against him and just throwing jump balls. And so I think they're going to keep Isaiah Oliver to mitigate that when they go up against a Darren Waller and the Giants come visit in week 3, oddly enough, or do they go up against I'm trying to think of a DeAndre Hopkins type. I know he's not in their division anymore, but those type of receivers where a smaller guy might get taken advantage of. I think Oliver is going to wind up seeing some time, but in a regular scenario, I think it's Ward and Thomas outside with Lenoir at the nickel. Mhm, mhm. No. Yeah, I do. Jair Brown can play. He's been really impressive this year as a rookie in more in the games than in practice, just because his skill set translates much more to be able to like hit and tackle, which you don't do in practice anymore. So I think he's going to be a really good player for them. He might overtake Tayshaun Gibson at some point during the year, but I think they really like Gibson's veteran presence. So I think Brown will be a third safety, kind of de facto linebacker, a little bit of do everything in his first year. And having Steve Wilkes in has honestly, I think, really helped their secondary just by virtue of the same way D'Amico Ryans helped their linebackers. I think Steve Wilkes is going to help their secondary. Samuel Womack, second year guy, has been super impressive in year 2. He was good last year, but has been really impressive this year. Ambry Thomas, non-factor last year, now looks like he's going to be a starter for them this year. Hufongo is a first team All Pro. I think he's got some issues with his game to clean up in terms of just over aggressiveness, but that's much easier to clean up than vice versa, where he's not being aggressive at all. But I think their secondary is going to be really really good, and I think it might need to be because that defensive end situation, especially with Nick Bosa not in camp, is pretty rough. So TJ Watt signed his deal September 9th. It was like right before the regular season started, and maybe that's what Nick Bosa is going for. He just doesn't want to participate in any preseason stuff, and he's going to get out there and he's going to be ready to go. And the team trusts him. He's not done any kind of OTAs or anything. They fully trust him to be fully ready. And this is even going back the last couple of years. They know he's going to work out and be ready to play. So it wouldn't surprise me if that's kind of how this winds up going. I don't think he's going to want it to go into the regular season. I don't think they're going to want it to go into the regular season. But outside of but outside of Bosa, he really has some leverage here because Drake Jackson has not played yet in the preseason. He's been dealing with some injury stuff, and even when he was on the field, did not seem to take the leap that the team was hoping he would take. Cleveland Furl's been a good player, but if he's starting and playing a lot, I think you might be in trouble. And outside of that, like Kerry Hyder is not it on the outside anymore. He had a nice season for them in 2020, but he's not a player you want to roll out there a lot. Austin Bryant has been pretty up and down, fine, I think rotational piece, but not a player that you want playing a ton of snaps for you. And outside of that, the depth there is just not very good. Robert Beal, 5th round draft pick out of Georgia, hasn't been healthy and hasn't played in any preseason games. There's just a lot of question marks on the edge that they don't get erased by Bosa being back, but they're mitigated some by his return. Mhm. Yeah. No, I think people just want him back. I have not heard any ill will towards Bosa or the team. I think there's a, kind of get it done thing, but I think if it's practice leading up to week 1 and he's not around, I think that's when you'll really start to see people really, really outwardly freak out. Mm, yeah. Well, not based on what we've seen in the games, but in practice, he's been cash. Like he's been, I think his only misses in practice were from like 63 yards, and then he had a 43 yarder that got blocked. He'd been so good, and then he misses those first two against the Raiders, and then he comes back and he hit all three of his field goals against Denver in week two, but he missed an extra point. And his game winning field goal, I think it was a 32 yarder, like just snuck inside the upright. So it seems that he's calibrating a little bit. I think he's still going to be their kicker. He was the 99th pick. I think it would really have to be a disaster to not make the team over Zane Gonzalez. But it's, I have a lot of friends who are Michigan fans, and they were over the moon about Jake Moody. It seems like you're in the same boat, but it's been a struggle early. Mm. Yeah, depth on the offensive line for sure. So I'm gonna go through these position by position. Trent Williams is Trent Williams, he's great. Aaron Banks, good player last year. No issues so far this year. Jake Brendel, same deal. He just talked the other day about how going against Javon Hargrave every day in practice has been a huge boost for him. Spencer Burford at the right guard spot, I think, has taken some strides this offseason. He didn't play right guard full time in college. He was a tackle, and he got moved inside last year as a rookie, just out of camp. And I think was not great, but he wasn't consistently bad either. And I think he's taken some strides this year, and I think they're pretty happy with him. Colton McKivitz at right tackle is the big question mark. He's just not when he has played extended snaps, it hasn't been great. But he's also not gotten an opportunity to start and play a bunch at his natural right tackle position. So they are big believers there. They didn't bring in much competition for him, and that's been the problem for me is when you start getting into the back end of this depth chart, and not that offensive line depth is a problem for every team. This is not unique to the 49ers. It's hard to find good offensive linemen, right? But Jalen Moore, a tackle prospect from Western Michigan that they drafted to kick inside because he's more of a guard size. He's not moved inside yet in 3 seasons, and he's just not a great player at tackle. If he's your swing tackle, I think it's a problem. Nick Zakel, second year, again, a tackle from Fordham that they're trying to transition inside, not having a ton of success. John Feliciano is like their best backup offensive lineman, which, okay. Matt Pryor, not been good. He may or may not make the team. It's just it's a mess if they have an injury on the line. Yeah, I was super surprised. I thought for sure they had 3 third-round picks. I thought for sure they would draft somebody in the 3rd round because maybe he beats out McKivitz, but worst case, he's hopefully some good depth, and they just don't. If Trent Williams goes down, like, pick any of the Niners' weapons, I think they could figure out life without him. If Trent Williams is unavailable for a long stretch, I don't know how the 49ers survive it. They just don't have any kind of quality behind him that would give you any kind of confidence that they can move the ball without him. Mhm. Right. That's kinda what I keep going back to is, hey, maybe they're seeing something that I'm missing, which is super easy to fathom. They're smarter people than me. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I don't know how they leave him off the roster at this point. So I'm not a big college football guy. So most of what I watch from draft picks is either leading up to the draft or after the 49ers draft them. And I knew Ronnie Bell had the torn ACL in 2021 and then bounced back and had a good year last year, especially considering that he was coming off a major injury. I did not anticipate him being as good after the catches he's been. Like, you could see it at Michigan, the tenacity that he played with, right? Like, really good blocker, fearless over the middle, could impact the game at 3 levels, not necessarily a burner. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and not necessarily a burner, but enough speed to stretch defenses, vertically. Like, you saw the vision, and it was like, okay, if he can contribute on special teams, maybe he figures his way onto the roster. But man, it's jet sweeps, it's deep throws, it's stuff over the middle, and he's breaking tackles and he's making catches. I with injuries to Danny Gray, he has a SC joint sprain in his shoulder, and it sounds like he's going to miss the first couple weeks. And then Ray McLeod has a broken wrist, and it sounds like he's going to miss the first few weeks. I don't know how Ronnie Bell is not one of this team's 4 or 5 best receivers at cut down time. So I would be stunned if he doesn't wind up making the team. And honestly, it wouldn't shock me if he winds up having a little bit of a role in his first year as well. Yeah, I don't know how much faith they have in that, but he's gotten better this year, which is a plus. His speed is game changing, and I really believe that they think they have to have a guy like Danny Gray on their roster to stretch defenses vertically, and just the way it forces defenses to defend you. So he just has to be able to do something more than run straight. Like, that's it. He has to know where to line up. He has to be able to block. And then they gave him a jet sweep finally last year. I was begging them all year. You watch the Chiefs, and the Chiefs are like, hey, Mecole Hardman, you may not be a great receiver, but you're fast as heck. So here's the football, go run. And they did that to the Niners like 10 times when they throttled them at Levi Stadium. And I don't know how you watch that and don't go, hey, give Danny Gray the ball like that twice a game. And they finally did it against Denver. Well, Gray has it's there, it's well blocked. He has to make one cut and he's gone. I'm telling he was out of here. I went and watched the all 22. But he kept it outside. Like that's the kind of little stuff that matters for Kyle Shanahan in this offense and frankly any offense. But that play went for 9 yards and that's a nice gain. But it could have gone for 40 and a touchdown. And those are the kind of things that Danny Gray has to clean up to get on the field consistently, I think. And first he's got to get healthy this year, but I do think they still believe in him because I think they think they need him or need a player like him on their roster. They just don't have anybody with that kind of speed. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, he's not been great. He had some drop problems in camp, and then you feel really bad for a kid like this. So he's at Alabama as a defensive end, transfers to tight end, or not transfers, but changes positions to tight end. Doesn't catch any passes for 3 years. Becomes a factor as a receiver in his last two. Becomes a third round pick. Gets into camp and just can't hang on to the football. And then he gets into his first game with a chance to put these drops behind him. First ball comes to him. He bobbles a little bit, catches it, fumbles it. And it's like, man, this poor guy. But he's big and strong, and you can see it when he blocks. Like, you can see that like, he has an NFL size and NFL body, and he can move NFL defenders. But he came back in this last in week 2 of the preseason against Denver. He caught all three of the 4 passes thrown his way. Didn't have a drop, 46 yards. He had a touchdown, and it's like, okay, Now you see why he was a third. You start to kind of see it coming together a little bit. So I think he's going to make the team, especially if he has another good preseason game on Friday against the Chargers. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So I don't think he'll ever be the player we saw in like 2018 again, where he's going for 1,000 yards. But the connection he has with Brock Purdy and Purdy's ability to extend plays, I think is gonna revitalize Kittle a little bit. He had a bunch of long touchdowns last year that came from Purdy just finding him on scramble drills. And he's also gotten a lot better in the red zone. I think he has 9 red zone touchdowns the last 2 years after only having 5 in his first 3 years or first 4 years. And that to me is where he needed to improve. And so maybe the explosive plays aren't there as much. Maybe they're not leaning on him as much offensively with Samuel and Ayuk and McCaffrey. But man, get down in the red zone, get him in a scramble drill, or get Brock Purdy in a scramble drill where Kittle can run away from a linebacker or whatever. And I really like the next phase of Kittle's career. So I think there's a little bit of a resurgence coming from him, even if it looks different than it did in 2018 and 2019. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. He's gonna have a role in the offense, even with Christian McCaffrey, because of what McCaffrey does as a receiver, where he can just split out wide and you have Elijah Mitchell on the field, and now, you're messing with how defenses go about lining up. But yeah, Mitchell is really, really talented, and he's so good in this offense. He's played 17 games in 2 years. Like, that's it, and he's already banged up with a hip this year. So, I I have no doubts about what Elijah Mitchell can do on the field. I have doubts about whether he can stay on the field, and that's gonna be the key for him. Yeah, I think they are now. Davis Price has been really good in camp. He took a pretty significant leap. It looked like he was going the Trey Sermon route, where third round pick doesn't cut it in his rookie year, doesn't cut it in year two, and then gets let go. But he's been, I think, without Mitchell in there, I think he's been their second best back in camp. He's been better at catching passes than Jordan Mason. Mason was a better runner last year, but I think Davis Price, in the event that Mitchell is out, I think Davis Price steps in, and I think the Niners feel pretty good about it. I'm doing it. I'm stashing him just in case because, like I said, if one of McCaffrey or Mitchell go down, I think TDP gets some real work. Mhm. I've changed my mind on this. If you had asked me this 3 weeks ago, I would have said Ayuk, but Samuel, he talked about during the preseason, he talked about, or during the offseason, he was awful last year, and he came back and he's changed his body, and he looks so much different than he has at any point in his NFL career. He looks stronger, he looks sleeker, and then he comes in the first preseason game and looks explosive, looks like 2021 Debo again, and then comes back in the next practice and catches like 6 touchdowns and was electric with Purdy. So I think that, and keep in mind, Samuel missed the like 3 or he got hurt in one of the games and then missed another 3 of the games that Purdy started in the regular season. So he's not gotten a ton of time to work with Samuel and develop a connection with him. And it seems they're doing that. And Samuel, I think, is ready for a pretty significant bounce back year. I think they're happy with Jennings. He's so good in the red zone. He's so good on third downs, and what he does as a blocker for them, he's like another tight end in that respect. He talks a lot of trash. He practices hard, he plays super hard. I think Kyle Shanahan really likes Juwan Jennings. Yeah. Yeah, sure will. Yeah, yeah, me too. Hit me up anytime.